The warning sirens had been screaming for 3 days straight. Commander Hana stood on the bridge of Defense Station Valor, watching through the massive viewport as another colony ship exploded in the distance. The flash of light briefly illuminated the darkness of space before fading into nothing. She closed her eyes and counted silently. 23 ships lost. 23 ships full of families who believed someone would save them. The Velrians were a peaceful species. They lived in harmony with water. Their bodies adapted to both land and sea. Their civilization had thrived for thousands of years without war, without weapons designed to kill. They joined the Andromeda Coalition, believing they would be protected by stronger species. They believed in the promise of unity and mutual defense. But now, as the Chromath swarm descended upon their worlds, like locusts, they learned a painful truth. Promises meant nothing when those who made them were afraid. Hana turned away from the viewport and looked at her crew. They were exhausted. Dark circles hung under their eyes. Some trembled as they worked at their stations. They had been fighting for weeks with no relief, no reinforcements, no hope. The Velrian fleet, once numbering 200 ships, was now reduced to 17 scattered survivors hiding in asteroid fields and behind moons. Their weapons were nearly depleted. Their shields flickered and failed more often with each passing hour. Across the bridge, Diplomatic Officer Tejo sat at his communication station, still sending distress calls. He had been doing this for days without receiving a single response. The coalition forces that promised to defend Velrian space had retreated 3 weeks ago. They called it a strategic repositioning. Hana called it abandonment. The coalition deemed the Velrian system too costly to defend. Better to lose one species than risk their fleets against the Chromath. The Chromath were nightmares given form. Insectoid creatures that consumed entire civilizations. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They simply took everything and left nothing behind but dead worlds. 20 years ago, they had swept through a dozen systems before anyone stopped them. Hana heard the stories of how humanity fought them back then, though she never met a human. They were a mysterious species that joined the coalition, but rarely participated in its affairs. Some called them isolationists. Others said they were still recovering from their own war with the Chromath. A junior officer named Sora approached Hana with a tablet. Her hands shook as she held it out. The data on the screen made Hana's stomach turn. 5 Chromath motherships had entered the outer system. Each one was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of troops. Behind them came dozens of smaller warships and countless fighter craft. It was an invasion force designed to crush any resistance absolutely and completely. Hana looked at the tactical display. Her station had perhaps 6 hours before the Chromath reached firing range. 6 hours before everything ended. She thought about the civilian shelters deep in the station's core. 30,000 Velrians huddled there, including 2,000 children. They looked to her for protection she couldn't provide. They believed she would save them. But there was nothing left to fight with. Tejo suddenly stood up from his station, drawing everyone's attention. He stared at his screen with an expression Hana couldn't read. Hope? Desperation? Maybe both. He turned to face her, and she saw tears on his face. "Commander," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found something. An old frequency. It's ancient, barely used anymore. It was registered to the humans when they first joined the coalition." Hana felt her heart sink. The humans. Yes, they were part of the coalition, but they kept to themselves. They had 3 colony worlds, far from this region of space. Why would they respond when the entire coalition had abandoned them? But she saw the look in Tejo's eyes. He needed to try. They all needed something to hold on to in these final hours. "Do it," she said quietly. "Send the message." Tejo sat back down and began composing the transmission. His fingers moved slowly, carefully choosing each word. This wasn't an official military distress call. This was something more personal, more honest. When he finished, he looked back at Hana for approval. She read the message on her command screen and felt tears of her own forming. The message was simple, direct. It told of their situation, without military jargon or diplomatic language. It explained that they were going to die, that their people were going to be wiped out, and it ended with one sentence that cut through all pretense. To anyone listening, we have children here. Please. Tejo sent the transmission and sat back in his chair. The bridge fell silent, except for the constant wail of the alarms. Everyone knew what came next. They would wait out these final hours. They would make what peace they could with their gods and their loved ones. And when the Chromath came, they would fight to the very end, even though it was hopeless. Hana issued the evacuation order for all civilians to move to the core shelters. She didn't tell them it wouldn't matter. The shelters were designed to survive battles between fleets. Not the complete destruction the Chromath would bring, but it gave the people something to do. It let them believe they still had a chance. Hours passed slowly. The Chromath fleet drew closer, appearing larger on the tactical displays with each passing minute. Hana walked among her crew, placing her hand on shoulders, offering quiet words of thanks for their service. Some prayed at their stations. Others wrote final messages to families they would never see again. Sora, the young officer, sat silently crying, while still performing her duties, with steady hands. The Chromath motherships entered visual range. They were massive and terrible, their hulls covered in organic armor that looked like chitinous plates. Weapon ports glowed with malevolent red light. Fighter craft swarmed around them like flies around corpses. The tactical computer estimated their numbers at over 2,000 combat vessels of various sizes. Defense Station Valor had 43 operational weapons remaining, and shields that could withstand perhaps 3 direct hits. Tejo hadn't left his communication station. He kept monitoring that ancient human frequency, even though everyone knew no response would come. Hana appreciated his determination, even as it broke her heart. She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for trying," she said softly. He looked up at her with red eyes. "Someone should have come, Commander. Someone should have cared." "I know," Hana replied. "But we're alone now. We always were." The lead Chromath mothership powered its weapons. Target locks appeared on Hana's screen. This was it. The end of the Velrian civilization. She stood straight, squared her shoulders, and prepared to give her final orders to her crew. She would not let them see her fear in these last moments. Then Sora gasped from her sensor station. Hana turned to look at her. The young officer was staring at her screen with an expression of complete confusion. Her hands flew across the controls, checking and rechecking her readings. "Commander," Sora said, her voice shaking. "I'm detecting something. Interference patterns in the long-range sensors. Multiple signatures. They're close, but I can't get a clear reading. It's like something is blocking my scans." Hana moved to the sensor station and looked at the display. Sora was right. There were strange distortions in space just beyond the system's edge. Ghost readings that appeared and disappeared. The computer couldn't identify them, but they were there. Something was out in the darkness. Something was coming. 3 hours earlier and half a system away, space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that shouldn't be possible. If anyone had been watching with the right instruments, they would have seen ripples moving through the fabric of reality, like stones dropped in still water. But no one was watching. The Chromath were too focused on their victory. The Velrians were too busy preparing to die. And the rest of the galaxy had turned away. The darkness shifted. Something massive moved through the void, distorting light and radiation as it passed. Then, another, and another. 47 vessels glided through space like ghosts, their hulls wrapped in fields that bent sensor waves around them. To anyone scanning, there was nothing there. Just empty space. Just another stretch of cosmic darkness between the stars. On the bridge of the UESS Indomitable, Admiral Jinwoo stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He watched the main view screen, showing the Velrian system ahead. Behind him, His bridge crew worked in focused silence. Every station was manned by officers who had trained for this moment for years. They wore dark blue uniforms with simple insignia. No decoration, no flash, just function. That was the human way. The Indomitable was humanity's first tangent-class warship. It stretched 2.5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was layered with composite armor designed to withstand hits that would vaporize lesser ships. 4 massive engines drove it through space with surprising speed for something so large. And weapons. Engines. 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 So many weapons. 40 railgun turrets that could fire tungsten slugs at a fraction of light speed. Missile batteries, carrying warheads, that burned at temperatures found in stars. Point defense laser networks that could track and destroy thousands of incoming threats simultaneously. The ship was built for one purpose: war. Jinwoo was 53 years old. His hair was beginning to gray at the temples. Lines marked his face from years of command. He had fought the Chromath before, 20 years ago when they came to human space. Back then, humanity was new to the galactic stage. Their technology was primitive compared to coalition standards. The Chromath thought they would be easy prey. They were wrong. Humans learned quickly. They adapted. They fought with a ferocity that shocked everyone, including themselves. When the Chromath finally retreated, they left behind a humanity forever changed. Chief Engineer Yuna approached from the rear of the bridge. She was younger than Jinwoo, in her early 30s. With sharp eyes that missed nothing. She carried a tablet, showing ship status reports. Everything glowed green. All systems operational. All weapons ready. The stealth field that kept them hidden was holding perfectly. "Admiral," she said, coming to stand beside him. "We're 2 hours from optimal firing position. The fleet reports ready status across the board." Jinwoo nodded slowly. Behind the Indomitable, 46 other ships maintained formation. Cruisers bristling with missiles. Destroyers built for speed and precision strikes. Carriers holding hundreds of fighter craft. And frigates loaded with electronic warfare systems. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. They had built it in secret over 20 years, preparing for the day they knew would come. The day the Chromath would return, to finish what they started. But this time, humanity wouldn't be the target. This time, they would be something else entirely. Jinwoo pulled out his command tablet and read the message one more time. The message from Taeho. The Velrian diplomatic officer's words were simple and desperate. They cut through all the military planning and strategic calculations. 30,000 civilians. 2,000 children. 6 hours to live. No one coming to help. "That's all I needed to hear," Jinwoo said quietly. Yuna followed his gaze to the tablet. She had read the message too. Everyone on the ship had. It spread through the fleet within minutes of its reception. Some of the crew had cried, reading it. Others had become very quiet and very focused. All of them understood what it meant. Why they were here. "The Chromath don't know we're coming," Yuna said. "Their sensors can't detect us through the stealth field. We'll have complete surprise." "Good," Jinwoo replied. "They deserve what's coming to them." On the lower bridge level, Lieutenant Doyun stood with his fighter squadron commanders. They reviewed attack patterns on holographic displays. Doyun was the youngest officer in the room at 26, but he had logged more combat hours than most veterans. He flew during the last Chromath incursion when he was just a teenager in the Territorial Defense Forces. Now he commanded Wing Alpha, 300 of humanity's best pilots flying the newest generation of strike fighters. "We hit them fast and we hit them everywhere," Doyun explained to his squadron leaders. "They'll be confused at first. Use that. Target their point defense systems and communication arrays. Make them blind. Make them scattered. The capital ships will handle the heavy work." One of the squadron leaders, a woman named Mireille, studied the tactical display showing the Chromath formation. She shook her head slowly. "There are so many of them. 5 motherships. We've never faced that many at once. Then we'll make history, Doyun said with a cold smile. Besides, they're not expecting us. They think they're just mopping up some helpless civilians. They're about to learn different. Back in the Indomitable's medical bay, Chief Medical Officer Unji supervised her staff as they prepared for casualties. Beds were ready. Surgical equipment stood sterilized and waiting. Blood supplies were stocked. Trauma teams reviewed their procedures one final time. Unji was a veteran of the last war, too. She had seen what chromath weapons did to living tissue. She hoped she wouldn't see it again today. But she was ready. A young medic approached her nervously. "Doctor, do you think there will be many wounded?" Unji considered the question carefully. "I hope not. But hope doesn't matter. Preparation does." Check the plasma supplies again. Time moved forward. The human fleet drew closer to the Velrian system, still wrapped in their stealth fields. Still invisible to every sensor the chromath possessed. They maintained perfect formation. Each ship exactly where it needed to be. This was what they had trained for. This was what humanity built itself into after the last war. Never again would they be victims. Never again would they be helpless. And never again would they stand aside when others needed help. Jinwoo received updates from his other ships. Captain Bora on the UESS Defiant reported her railguns were charged and ready. Commander Suho on the UESS Retribution confirmed his missile batteries were armed. Captain Nari, leading the Marine detachment, reported her drop pods were loaded with troops ready to deploy. Every piece of the machine was in place. The Admiral called up a tactical display showing both the Chromath fleet and the Velrian defense station. The enemy had begun their final approach. Weapons were powered. Troops were boarding assault craft. They were preparing to finish this. To wipe out the last resistance and claim another world for their empire. All ships, Jinwoo transmitted across the fleet network. Final weapons check. Confirm stealth field integrity. We go to battle stations in 15 minutes. A chorus of confirmations came back. Professional. Calm. Ready. These weren't conscripts or volunteers with more courage than skill. These were professional warriors who chose this life, who trained for years to be here at this moment. Who would not fail? Jinwoo thought about the message again. About Taeho sending out that desperate call into the darkness, hoping someone would hear, someone would care. The Velrians had no way of knowing that humans monitored that old frequency every single day. That they kept it active specifically for moments like this. That humanity never forgot who helped them when they were new to the galaxy. The Velrians had voted to provide aid to human colonies during the last war. It wasn't much. Just some supplies and medical equipment. But they had stood up for humanity when others remained silent. Humans remembered things like that. They remembered debts. And they paid them back. 10 minutes to optimal position, the navigation officer announced. Yuna returned to the bridge after a final check of the engineering spaces. All reactors are running at maximum safe output. We can push to combat power on your order. Understood, Jinwoo replied. Tell the crew, this is what we prepared for. Tell them to make it count. The minutes ticked away. The human fleet moved into position around the Chromath Armada like wolves circling prey. The enemy had no idea they were there. No clue that death approached on silent engines. They celebrated too early. They assumed victory. That was their mistake. 5 minutes, the navigation officer said. Jinwoo walked to the center of the bridge. He looked around at his crew. At the officers who trusted him. At the young faces and the old faces. At the people who would follow him into hell itself if he asked. He felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like it always did before battle. All ships, he transmitted. Weapons free on my mark. Let them know we're here. Let them know that someone came. The human fleet dropped stealth simultaneously. 47 ships appeared from nowhere in a burst of light and electromagnetic radiation. The chromath sensors screamed warnings. Alarms blared across their ships. Confusion spread through their ranks like wildfire. And Jinwoo smiled. Fire. The universe exploded with light and violence. The Indomitable's main cannon fired. And for a brief moment, it seemed like a second sun had been born in the Velrian system. The magnetic accelerator cannon launched a tungsten slug the size of a transport vehicle at 4% the speed of light. The projectile crossed the distance to the lead Chromath mothership in less than 2 seconds. The Chromath commander had no time to react, no time to raise shields, no time to turn or evade. The slug hit the mothership dead center and kept going. It punched through armor, designed to withstand nuclear explosions like it was paper. It tore through decks and bulkheads and reactor cores. It exited the other side in a spray of metal and flame. For one frozen moment, the massive ship held together. Then it broke apart from the inside out, both halves tumbling away, as secondary explosions rippled through its length. The Chromath fleet erupted in chaos. Alarms screamed across every ship. Commanders shouted orders that couldn't be heard over the confusion. Sensors showed human vessels appearing everywhere, materializing from nothing like ghosts made real. The intelligence reports were all wrong. Humans weren't supposed to have this technology. They weren't supposed to have ships like these. They weren't supposed to be here at all. Lieutenant Doyoon's fighter launched from the Indomitable's bay with 299 others. The strike craft were sleek and deadly, painted in dark gray that made them nearly invisible against the void. They scattered into attack formations, moving with practiced precision that came from thousands of hours of training. Doyoon locked onto his first target, a Chromath destroyer that was still trying to figure out what was happening. Wing Alpha, weapons free, Doyoon transmitted. Hit them hard. Hit them fast. His fighter's railgun spat a stream of hypervelocity rounds that stitched across the destroyer's hull. Armor plating exploded outward. Behind him, his squadron mates added their fire. Missiles streaked away from wing hardpoints, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. The destroyer's point defense tried to respond, but the humans were too fast, too coordinated. The Chromath ship shuddered under the assault and began to list to port, trailing atmosphere and debris. The human cruiser UESS Defiant swept past a Chromath heavy warship and fired every railgun turret on its port side. 20 weapons unleashed simultaneously, the recoil making the entire ship shudder. The tungsten rounds hammered into the Chromath vessel's shields, overwhelming them through sheer volume of fire. When the shields collapsed, the rounds tore into armor and systems beneath. The Chromath ship's power failed, its engines died, and it became a tumbling hulk in less than 30 seconds. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Jinwoo watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. His fleet was performing exactly as designed. The Chromath had numbers, but humans had surprise, superior technology, and 2 decades of preparation. Every human ship knew its role. Every captain executed their orders with precision. This wasn't a battle. This was surgery. Target the second mothership, Jinwoo ordered. All batteries. Concentrate fire. 3 human destroyers broke from their attack runs and converged on a Chromath mothership that was trying to bring its main weapons to bear. They fired in sequence, their railguns sending a continuous stream of projectiles into the same section of the enemy's hull. The armor held for the first dozen impacts. Then it cracked. Then it shattered. The rounds began punching through into the ship's interior, destroying systems and killing crew by the hundreds. The mothership tried to turn, to bring its broadside weapons around. Too slow. Too late. The UESS Retribution came in from above and released a full spread of plasma torpedoes. The weapons burned bright blue as they crossed the space between ships. They hit the already damaged section and melted through what remained of the armor. Fusion fire consumed 3 entire decks. The mothership's reactor began to destabilize. Commander Hana watched from Defense Station Valor in complete shock. She had witnessed battles before. She had seen coalition fleets engage in combat exercises, but nothing had prepared her for this. The humans fought with a coordination and ferocity that seemed impossible. Their weapons were devastating. Their tactics were flawless, and they showed no mercy whatsoever. "Commander," Sora said from her station, her voice filled with awe. "The Chromath are trying to retreat. Multiple ships are attempting to break away from the engagement." Hana pulled up the tactical display and saw it was true. The Chromath fleet was fracturing. Ships were breaking formation and attempting to flee. They had come here expecting an easy conquest and instead found themselves in a slaughter. Their commanders realized too late that they had made a terrible mistake. Then Hana heard Jinwoo's voice broadcast across all frequencies. His tone was ice-cold and absolutely certain. "Not one ship leaves. Not one." The human fleet adjusted its formation with frightening efficiency. The faster destroyers and frigates moved to intercept fleeing Chromath vessels. The fighters formed a perimeter, hunting down smaller craft that tried to slip away. And the capital ships continued their methodical destruction of what remained of the enemy formation. A Chromath war master, desperate and furious, ordered his damaged cruiser to ram the Indomitable. It was an act of pure rage, a final attempt to hurt these humans who had appeared from nowhere and shattered his invasion force. The cruiser accelerated toward the human flagship with its remaining engines screaming at maximum power. Jinwoo saw it coming. He didn't order evasive maneuvers. Instead, he walked calmly to the weapons control station and looked at the tactical officer. "Broadside," he said simply. All 40 railgun turrets on the Indomitable's starboard side rotated to face the approaching Chromath ship. Targeting computers locked on. Capacitors discharged. And 40 tungsten slugs launched simultaneously, their combined muzzle flash visible from orbit. The wall of metal hit the Chromath cruiser head-on and simply obliterated it. The ship didn't explode or break apart. It ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic energy that exceeded some planetary bombardment weapons. Taeho stared at his communication station screen with tears streaming down his face. A transmission had come through on the human frequency. The words were simple and direct, spoken in slightly accented but perfect Velrian language. "Velrian Defense Station. This is Admiral Jinwoo of the United Earth Fleet. We're here to even the odds. Hold your position. We'll handle this." He tried to respond but couldn't find his voice. His hands shook too much to type. After days of sending messages into the void, after hours of believing no one cared, someone had answered. Someone had come. Someone was fighting for them. The third Chromath mothership attempted to power up its faster-than-light drive to escape. Captain Bora on the Defiant saw it happening and responded immediately. Her ship unleashed a spread of specialized missiles designed for one purpose: disrupting jump drives. The warheads detonated around the mothership, creating fields of electromagnetic chaos that made faster-than-light travel impossible. The Chromath ship was trapped. "All batteries, fire for effect," Bora ordered. The Defiant's weapons tore into the helpless mothership. Other human ships joined in, concentrating fire until the massive vessel simply came apart under the sustained assault. Hundreds of Chromath died in seconds, their bodies exposed to vacuum as hull breaches spread throughout the ship. Captain Nari stood in the drop pod bay with her Marines. They were armored in powered combat suits, carrying weapons designed to kill things much larger and tougher than humans. Nari had received reports that some Chromath troops had managed to board Defense Station Valor before the battle began. That couldn't be allowed to continue. "All units, prepare for combat drop," she ordered. "Velrians are counting on us. We don't fail. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, ma'am" echoed through the bay. The Marines loaded into their drop pods, each one a small armored capsule designed to survive atmospheric entry and enemy fire. The pods launched from the Indomitable in a wave, accelerating toward the defense station at speeds that would have killed unprotected humans. They hit the station's hull in a pattern that surrounded the Chromath entry point. The pods cut through the hull plating and released the Marines directly into the corridors where fighting was happening. Nari emerged from her pod into a scene of carnage. Chromath warriors, each one twice the size of a human and covered in natural armor, were advancing on a group of Velrian defenders. The Marines opened fire without hesitation. Their weapons used caseless ammunition and electromagnetic propulsion, firing rounds that could punch through chromath armor. The insectoid warriors turned to face this new threat, but they were too slow. Human reflexes enhanced by their combat suits and years of training gave them the edge. The chromath fell one after another, their bodies torn apart by sustained fire. Nari advanced through the corridor, her tactical display showing her Marines securing section after section. The chromath had expected to board the station and slaughter helpless civilians. Instead, they found themselves fighting humanity's best warriors in close-quarters combat. It was no contest. And then, back in space, the battle was ending. 43 minutes had passed since the human fleet decloaked. 5 chromath motherships were destroyed or disabled. Dozens of smaller warships drifted as burning hulks. Hundreds of fighter craft had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris, and not a single enemy vessel had escaped. The remaining chromath ships, those too damaged to fight but still capable of communication, began broadcasting surrender requests. Jinwoo listened to them with no expression on his face. He remembered the human colonies the chromath had attacked 20 years ago. He remembered the civilians they had killed, the children they had murdered. No, he said simply. The last few chromath ships died under human guns. When the final explosion faded, there was only silence and debris. The Velrian system was secure. The invasion was over. And humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most direct way possible. Jinwoo opened a channel to the defense station. Commander Hana, this is Admiral Jinwoo. The system is clear. Your people are safe. Hana stood in the docking bay of Defense Station Valor, trying to compose herself. Her uniform was stained with coolant fluid from emergency repairs. Her hands still trembled from adrenaline and exhaustion. Around her, Velrian crew members worked to secure the bay for the arriving human shuttle. They moved in a daze, still processing what had happened, still trying to understand that they were alive when they should have been dead. The shuttle came through the atmospheric field with a gentle hiss of hydraulics. It was sleek and functional, painted in the same dark gray as the human warships. No decorative elements. No unnecessary design features. Just clean lines and purpose. The shuttle settled onto the deck with barely a sound, and the boarding ramp extended. Admiral Jinwoo emerged first, followed by several officers and a security detail. He was shorter than Hana expected, built compact and solid, like someone who spent time in high-gravity training. His uniform was immaculate despite the battle he had just commanded. His eyes were dark and thoughtful, taking in everything around him with the careful attention of a career military officer. When his gaze met Hana's, she saw something there that surprised her. Kindness mixed with steel. Protocol dictated she should salute, should maintain military formality, should thank him officially on behalf of her chain of command. But protocol had failed her people. Protocol had let them die. So Hana did something that surprised even herself. She walked straight to Jinwoo and embraced him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders as tears streamed down her face. "You came," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You actually came." For a moment, Jinwoo stood rigid with surprise. Then his posture softened, and he returned the embrace, one hand patting her back gently. His officers looked away, giving their commander and the Velrian woman a moment of privacy in the midst of the public bay. "We heard your call," Jinwoo said quietly. "We heard about the children. That's all humans need to hear." Hana pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She felt embarrassed by her lack of composure. But Jinwoo just smiled kindly and offered her a clean cloth from his pocket. She took it gratefully. "I don't understand," Hana said. "The coalition abandoned us. They said the system wasn't strategically valuable enough to defend. But you came with an entire fleet. Why would humanity risk so much for us?" Jinwoo looked around the docking bay at the Velrian crew members who were watching their exchange. His expression became more serious. 20 years ago, when the Chromath first came to human space, we were new to the galaxy. Our technology was primitive. Our fleets were small. We were facing extinction, and the Coalition debated whether helping us was worth the cost. Most species voted against intervention, but the Velrians voted to send aid. Not much. Some medical supplies, some food shipments. But you stood up for us. When most of the galaxy remained silent, he met Hana's eyes directly. Humans don't forget things like that. We remember who helped us. We remember debts owed. And we pay them back. Taeho approached from the command center, walking quickly despite his exhaustion. His face was still wet with tears, but he wore a smile that seemed to light up the entire bay. He stopped in front of Jinwoo and bowed deeply in the traditional Velrian manner. "Admiral, I am Diplomatic Officer Taeho. I sent the distress call. I never thought anyone would answer. We monitor that frequency every day," Jinwoo replied. "Specifically for moments like this. We wanted to make sure that if someone needed help, if someone called out in the darkness, humanity would be there to answer." Chief Engineer Yuna stepped forward, carrying several data tablets. She had been coordinating with the Velrian engineering teams to assess damage to the defense station. Her expression was all business. But Hana caught the hint of compassion in her eyes. "Commander Hana, we're prepared to assist with repairs. We've brought fabrication equipment and spare parts. Your station will be operational within 48 hours. We can't pay you," Hana said softly. "Our economy is destroyed. Our fleet is gone. We have nothing to offer in exchange." Yuna looked genuinely confused by the statement. "We don't want payment. This is what allies do for each other." The word hung in the air. Allies. Not clients. Not subordinates. Not species to be protected in exchange for tribute. Just allies. Equals, standing together. Hana felt something break loose in her chest. Some knot of tension and fear that had been there for weeks. They weren't alone anymore. In the medical bay, Chief Medical Officer Unji worked alongside Velrian doctors to treat the wounded. The casualties had been surprisingly light, thanks to the human intervention. But there were still injuries that needed attention. Unji moved between beds with practiced efficiency, her medical scanner analyzing injuries and prescribing treatments. She stopped at one bed, where a young Velrian civilian sat. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She had a broken arm from falling during the evacuation. Unji scanned the injury and prepared a bone-knitting device, then paused. The girl was staring at her with wide eyes, full of curiosity rather than fear. "Are you a human?" the girl asked in heavily accented standard language. "I am," Unji replied with a gentle smile. "My name is Dr. Unji. I'm going to fix your arm. It won't hurt at all. My mother said humans saved us. She said you came from far away just to help people you never met." Unji activated the bone-knitting device and held it over the girl's arm. The technology was human-designed, far more advanced than standard Coalition medical equipment. Within seconds, the fracture was healing, the bone cells regenerating under controlled electromagnetic fields. "Your mother is right," Unji said. "We came because you needed help. That's what friends do." The girl watched the device work with fascination. "Will you stay? Will humans stay here? To protect us?" Unji finished the treatment and set down the device. She knelt beside the bed, so she was at eye level with the child. "We'll stay as long as you need us. And even when we leave, we won't be far. If you call for help again, we'll come again. That's a promise." Back in the docking bay, Jinwoo and Hana walked toward the command center. Captain Nari had joined them, still wearing her combat armor with scorch marks from the fighting in the corridors. She reported that all Chromath borders had been eliminated and the station was secure. Her Marines were already working with Velrian security forces to establish better defensive positions in case of future attacks. As they walked, Taeho matched pace with Jinwoo, his mind racing with questions. "Admiral, I have to ask. That fleet you brought. The technology, the weapons. The Coalition Intelligence Services had no idea humanity possessed capabilities like that. How did you build all this without anyone knowing? Jinwoo smiled slightly. We learned from the last war that we couldn't depend on others for our security. So we prepared. We built. We trained. All in secret, away from prying eyes. The Coalition thought we were isolationists. We let them think that. Better. They underestimate us. But why? Why prepare for a war that might never come? Because it always comes, Jinwoo said, his voice hardening. Peace is wonderful. We all want it. But peace only lasts when evil knows there's a cost to breaking it. The Chromath needed to learn that lesson. Today, we taught them. They reached the command center, where displays showed the aftermath of the battle. Human ships were already organizing recovery efforts, pulling survivors from damaged Velrian vessels and retrieving escape pods. The efficiency was remarkable. Every human ship knew its assignment without needing constant orders from the flagship. Hana pulled up a strategic map showing Coalition space. Red markers indicated Chromath fleet movements. There were 3 other invasion forces moving through undefended systems, destroying everything in their path. The Coalition had pulled back to defend only their core worlds, abandoning dozens of species to their fate. Admiral, Hana said carefully, the Chromath have 3 more fleets active in this region. They're attacking systems throughout the Outer Rim, species that can't defend themselves. Jinwoo studied the map silently for a long moment. Yuna came to stand beside him, looking at the same display. She knew what he was thinking. The entire bridge crew could sense the decision forming. We didn't come just to save the Velrians, Jinwoo said finally. We came to send a message. One system isn't enough. The Chromath need to understand that their expansion is over, that humanity won't tolerate genocide in our region of space. He turned to his communication officer. Send a message to Fleet Command. Request all available ships to rendezvous at these coordinates. Tell them we're continuing the campaign. Taeho stared at him in shock. Admiral, with respect, you've done enough. You saved us. You don't owe anyone else anything. It's not about owing, Jinwoo replied. It's about what's right. Those other species being attacked right now, they have children too. They have people calling out for help just like you did. And if we can answer, if we have the power to help, then we must. Hana felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different. Not tears of fear or relief, but something else. Hope, pride, gratitude. She looked at this human admiral who had come to save her people and was now preparing to save others. The Coalition had abandoned its principles, but humanity was reminding the galaxy what those principles meant. We'll join you, Hana said suddenly. Whatever ships we can repair, whatever crew we can muster. The Velrians will fight alongside humanity. Jinwoo smiled and offered his hand. Then we fight together, as they shook hands, sealing the alliance. News of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire through Coalition space. Within hours, every species knew that humanity had intervened in the Velrian system. Within days, everyone had seen the battle recordings. The images were stunning and terrible. Human ships appearing from nowhere. Chromath motherships being torn apart like paper. An entire invasion force destroyed in 43 minutes. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. That mistake would not be repeated. The United Earth Fleet moved from system to system, like a force of nature. Wherever the Chromath appeared, humanity answered. The second battle came at the Thryn colonies, where insectoid warriors had cornered the last defenders on their homeworld. The human fleet arrived with 78 ships now, reinforcements having arrived from Earth. The Chromath were driven back in less than an hour. The Thryn people watched from their shelters as human marines fought building to clear their cities of invaders. Lieutenant Doyun became famous throughout the fleet for his daring fighter tactics. In the Battle of Sekor Station, he led his squadron through a debris field that sensors said was impossible to navigate. They emerged behind the Chromath lines and destroyed 3 command ships before the enemy even knew they were there. Other pilots started calling him Ghost, and the nickname stuck. He accepted it with the same calm focus he brought to everything else. At the Miraland system, the human fleet intercepted a Chromath force that outnumbered them 2-1. Admiral Jinwoo refused to back down. He positioned his ships in the orbital space between the Chromath and the civilian population centers below. When the enemy commander demanded humanity's surrender, Jinwoo broadcast a response that was heard across the entire system. "We are the United Earth Fleet. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. And we do not allow the murder of innocents. If you want to reach those civilians, you'll have to go through us. We're waiting." The battle lasted 6 hours. It was brutal and costly. 3 human destroyers were lost. The cruiser, UESS Valiant, suffered critical damage and had to be towed away. But when it ended, the Chromath fleet was destroyed, and the Miralon people were saved. The human fleet stayed for 3 days to help with recovery efforts before moving on to the next crisis. Captain Nari and her Marines became legends in their own right. At the siege of Port Caldera, Chromath troops had trapped 5,000 civilians in an underground shelter complex. The enemy was preparing to pump poison gas into the ventilation system. Nari led 200 Marines on a drop insertion directly into the enemy position. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor, until every Chromath soldier was dead. When Nari emerged from the complex covered in dirt and ichor, the civilians waiting outside erupted in cheers. She just nodded tiredly and radioed for extraction. The human fleet grew larger. More ships arrived from Earth every week. 120 ships, then 150, then 200. But it wasn't just humans anymore. The Velarians sent every ship they could repair, with Commander Hana personally leading their reformed fleet. The Thrin contributed their best cruisers. The Miralan provided supply vessels and medical ships. Other species that had been saved joined the growing armada. They called themselves the Liberation Fleet. Tejo traveled with the fleet as its diplomatic coordinator. He documented everything. Every battle. Every rescue. Every species saved. He interviewed survivors and recorded their stories. He captured images of human and alien crew members working side by side. He wrote reports that were broadcast across Coalition space, and slowly, public opinion began to shift. The Coalition leadership had abandoned its people, but humanity had stepped in to fill the void. The Coalition Council held emergency sessions. Ambassadors argued and blamed each other for the catastrophe. They had left entire systems to die, and humanity had exposed their cowardice for all to see. Some council members called for sanctions against Earth. Others demanded that humanity cease its independent military operations. Ambassador Seojun, representing humanity at the council, listened to it all with growing contempt. When they finally gave him the floor to respond, he stood slowly and looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. His voice was cold and precise when he spoke. "You abandoned them. We didn't. That's the only explanation you're getting. Humanity will continue our operations until the Chromath threat is eliminated. If the Council has a problem with that, you're welcome to send your own fleets. We notice they seem to be available, hiding in your core systems while civilians die." The chamber erupted in outrage. Some delegates shouted at Seojun. Others walked out in protest. He stood calmly at his podium and waited for them to finish. When the noise died down, he continued. The coalition was built on principles of mutual defense and shared prosperity. You threw away those principles the moment defending them became difficult. Humanity will not make that mistake. Quote, "We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We answer distress calls from species we've never met. We risk our lives for strangers, because it's the right thing to do. If that makes us a problem for this council, so be it." He gathered his materials and left the chamber. Behind him, the council descended into chaos. The political structure that had governed the galaxy for centuries was crumbling. Trust was broken, authority was questioned, and humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as defenders. The decisive moment came at the Chromath forward base. Intelligence gathered from captured enemy vessels revealed the location of their main staging area for the invasion. It was a massive installation built around an asteroid, equipped with shipyards and supply depots. Thousands of Chromath warriors were stationed there, along with a reserve fleet of over 300 ships. It was the heart of their operation in this region of space. Admiral Jinwoo studied the intelligence reports with his senior staff. The Liberation fleet had grown to 240 vessels, but attacking such a heavily fortified position would be costly. Chief Engineer Yuna estimated they would lose at least 30% of their ships. Dr. Unji prepared for mass casualties. Captain Nari's Marines trained for the largest assault operation in human history. We could bypass it, Captain Bora suggested. Continue hitting their deployed forces and let the base wither without support. No, Jinwoo said firmly. As long as that base exists, the Chromath can rebuild, can launch new invasions. This ends now. We hit them with everything we have. Lieutenant Do-yoon plotted attack runs for his expanded fighter wings. He now commanded over 800 pilots from multiple species. The coordination was complex, but they had trained together for weeks. They knew each other's capabilities. They trusted each other. That trust would need to be enough. The Liberation fleet approached the Chromath base in a formation that Jinwoo called the Hammer. Heavy capital ships formed the center. With cruisers and destroyers on the flanks, carriers positioned themselves at the rear, ready to launch fighters. The Velrian ships took positions alongside human vessels, their crews determined to prove their worth. Other allied species filled in the formation, each one ready to fight. The Chromath detected them coming from far away. They had time to prepare, to position their ships, to ready their weapons. The base commander watched the approaching fleet and sent a message to Chromath High Command. He told them that humanity was coming, that the lesser species had found courage, that the invasion was in jeopardy. The response he received was simple: destroy them all. The battle began at maximum range. Both sides launched missiles that crossed the space between fleets like swarms of angry insects. Point defense systems on both sides lit up, creating webs of laser fire that intercepted thousands of warheads. But some got through. Ships on both sides shuddered under impacts. Armor cracked. Shields failed. The first casualties were taken before the fleets even closed to weapons range. Jinwoo stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching the tactical display with calm focus. He had commanded 3 major engagements now, and each one had taught him something about the Chromath. They were aggressive, brutal, but not particularly creative. They relied on overwhelming force and intimidation. Humanity would use that against them. All ships, execute Pattern Delta, he ordered. The Liberation fleet split into 3 groups. The center force, led by the Indomitable, drove straight at the base. The flanking groups curved around to attack from the sides. The Chromath commander saw the maneuver and moved ships to intercept the flanks, thinning his center defense. Exactly what Jinwoo wanted. Fighters, launch all wings. Do-yoon received the order and led his massive strike force out into space. 800 fighters from a dozen species accelerated toward the enemy base. They weaved through the capital ship engagement, too small and fast for most weapons to track. Do-yoon's tactical display was a nightmare of overlapping threats. But his instincts guided him through. His squadron mates followed his lead, trusting his abilities completely. They hit the base's outer defenses like a tidal wave. Missiles, railgun fire, and laser strikes concentrated on the defensive platforms. One by one, the platforms exploded or went dark. The path was open for the capital ships. The Indomitable's main cannon fired again, its now famous weapon that had become a symbol of human power. The tungsten slug hit the base's central structure and penetrated deep before exploding. Internal systems failed. The base shuddered like a wounded animal. Captain Nari's Marines launched in their drop pods, heading straight for the base's command center. They landed under fire, their armored forms smashing through hull plating to gain entry. The fighting inside was intense. Corridor by corridor, room by room, Chromath warriors fought with desperate fury, but human determination was stronger. Step by step, Nari's forces advanced. The battle raged for 8 hours. Ships fought at point-blank range. Crews performed miracles of damage control to keep their vessels operational. Medics worked until they collapsed from exhaustion, and slowly, inevitably, the Chromath lines broke. Their ships began to fall back. Their base's defenses crumbled. The Liberation Fleet pressed its advantage ruthlessly. When Nari's Marines reached the command center and killed the last defenders, the battle was over. The Chromath forward base was captured. Their reserve fleet was destroyed. Their invasion capability was shattered. The cost had been high. 37 ships lost, including several from allied species. Thousands dead. But the Chromath threat in this region was finished. Admiral Jinwoo broadcast a message on all frequencies, making sure the Chromath High Command would hear it. To the Chromath Empire. You asked for this war decades ago. We haven't forgotten. Today, we answer in full. Your invasion is over. Your forces are defeated. Withdraw from coalition space and never return. These are our terms. Full retreat from all occupied systems. War reparations to be paid to every species you attacked, and you never, ever target civilians again. If you refuse, we will come to your home systems. We will bring this war to your doorstep. Choose wisely. The Chromath High Command received the message in their distant capital. They looked at the recordings of the battle. They calculated their losses. They realized that humanity was not the weak species they remembered from 20 years ago. These humans had become something else. Something dangerous. Something that would not stop until the Chromath were destroyed, or until they surrendered. 3 days later, the Chromath Empire sued for peace. They accepted Jinwoo's terms in full. Their fleets began withdrawing from coalition space. The war was over. The Liberation Fleet returned to Velrian space as heroes. Millions gathered to watch the ships arrive. Human vessels flew in formation with Velrian, Thrin, Miralon, and dozens of other species. They had fought together, bled together, won together. The bonds formed in battle would last for generations. On Defense Station, Valor, now fully repaired and upgraded with human technology, a memorial ceremony was held for those who died. Representatives from every species in the Liberation Fleet attended. Commander Hana stood beside Admiral Jinwoo as speaker after speaker honored the fallen. When it was Taeho's turn, he walked to the podium and spoke from his heart. They thought no one would come. We thought we would die alone, forgotten by the galaxy we had trusted. But humanity heard our cry in the darkness. They crossed the stars to stand with us, not for profit, not for territory, but because somewhere in that darkness, children were crying, and humanity answered. They came when no one else would. They fought when others fled. They stood when we had fallen. And they reminded us all what it truly means to be civilized, to be worthy, to be more than just survivors, but protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. He looked directly at Jinwoo. Thank you. From all of us. Thank you for answering. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Then, slowly, naturally, the assembled crowd began to applaud. It started quietly, but grew louder. Human and alien hands clapping together, a sound of gratitude and respect and hope for the future. Admiral Jinwoo stood on the Indomitable's bridge one final time before the fleet dispersed. His ships would return to Earth for refit and repair. but they would be back. Humanity had taken its place in the galaxy not as conquerors, but as guardians. They had shown what was possible when courage met capability, when principle met power. He looked at the stars through the viewport and spoke quietly to himself, though his bridge crew heard every word. We came when no one else would, and we'll keep coming. That's what we do. That's what humans are. And across the galaxy, species that had once barely known humanity's name now knew a simple truth. If you called for help, if you needed someone to stand beside you in the darkness, humanity would answer. They would come. They always would.